If the name George Dixon doesn't ring a bell, then you're not alone. But inside and outside the boxing arena, Dixon was a pioneer. He was the first boxer to fight a sanctioned interracial match, and he invented the training technique of shadow boxing. Nova Scotia playwright George Boyd thinks Dixon deserves a place in Canadian history, and he hopes his new play, which is called Shine Boy, will give that to him.
Take a walk by the whipping post. That's the bar you frequent and you love the most.
Shine Boy is a musical, and it premiered last week at the Neptune Theatre in Halifax. It tells the story of George Dixon's dramatic rise and fall. He was born in Halifax, but he moved to Boston as a boy and started boxing there in a career that spanned 16 years. He won world championships in 3 divisions. But not all of Dixon's fights took place in the ring. He constantly had to struggle against racism. The pressure finally drove him to alcohol and to opium abuse, and he died of withdrawal at the age of 39.
Joining us now from the edge of the stage at the Neptune Theatre is George Boyd. Hi, George.
Hi, Peter.
You know, I'm okay, but I feel a little ashamed that I had never heard of George Dixon before. I knew a football player for the Montreal Alouettes once by that name, but never the boxer George Dixon.
Well, a lot of people, surprisingly, have never heard of George Dixon. That's one of the reasons why I did the play, in fact. What I say in my playwright's notes is to rescue him from obscurity.
Why haven't we heard about him?
Simply because I think there is a conspiracy, if you will, on behalf of sports historians to suppress black achievement.
Do you think that's sorry to interrupt, but do you think that's a conscious conspiracy, or has it just sort of happened that way?
I think it's conscious. And because most of we're bombarded by the American firsts, you know, Americans were the first in this, the first in that. George Dixon was buried. Of course, George Dixon was a Canadian. He was born in Halifax.
Tell me a bit about him. He was born in Halifax, but did he do most of his boxing in the U.S.?
Yes, he went to Boston when he was 14 years of age. He was going to be a photographer's apprentice, but he apprenticed with this photographer who happened to be a fight photographer, and he saw the money and the women, and he got involved in the game.
That's quite a switch from planning on being a photographer to being a boxer. Now, did he make lots of money as a boxer?
Yes. Some of the papers have recorded that he was the richest black man in all of North America at the time. He owned stables of thoroughbred horses in Boston, a mansion, beach house somewhere in Massachusetts, etc. Quite wealthy.
He was the first black heavyweight champion.
No, he was the first black paperweight champion, which is now the flyweight division.
Right.
In fact, George Dixon went on to win 3 world boxing titles: the flyweight, the bantamweight, and the paperweight.
Tell me a bit about his career, especially in the southern United States. I've read some stories here that just are almost unbelievable about what he had to put up with, especially in the South.
Well, it was incredible. When I started researching the play, I couldn't find a voice for George Dixon. I couldn't get a handle on the character. And it started dawning on me that George Dixon was not a preacher. He spoke through his gloves. He was supposed to fight in New Orleans in the latter part of his career. And obviously, most people expected him to lose that fight, New Orleans being the bastion of Southern racism. So what George Dixon did, of course, he went down there with the intention of beating Jack Skelly. And they got in the ring, and the people who surrounded the ring, the men who surrounded the ring, stabbed him with lit cigars when he ventured near the ropes. He went to the other side of the ring, and they hit him with billy clubs. So instead of just tanking the fight or losing the fight like most people would, George Dixon knocked Jack Skelly out in the middle of the ring. After that was over, the Ku Klux Klan jumped in the ring and wanted to lynch him. So, you know, here's a great Canadian, and this is one of the reasons why I went through with the play. Yeah. I mean, you could see what he was fighting for.
You know, if history has ignored him consciously or unconsciously, it must have been difficult for you to find the material, piece it all together.
It was. I went to the Nova Scotia Archives here in Halifax, and the biographical file on Dixon was paper thin. Now, subsequently, I understand it's been expanded, but there was just nothing there on him, just transcripts of fights, and that's why I had such a hard time getting a beat on his character, because it was all fight transcriptions. And then I came across an article with Dixon's byline, which told me that he was very articulate, concise, very intelligent man. And once again, the gloves started speaking to me.
Yeah.
You know, his voice emanated from the gloves.
Now, what happened to him after his ring career? It sounds as if he had a pretty rough time of it. He died, what, at the age of 39?
Yeah. He stopped fighting in 1906. 3 years later, he was dead in Bellevue Hospital. Opium and alcohol addiction. His friends deserted him with the fame. His family deserted him. You know, the Boston family deserted him with the fame. And he just went around the streets drinking and turned up in Bellevue Hospital, and he died the next day. Wow. Very tragic ending.
Yeah. What do you think we can learn from him? I mean, again, kids growing up in school now sure don't hear about this man. If he could be in the history books, what would it teach us?
That we must not let lethargy set in the civil and human rights struggle. That no matter how rich one becomes or how comfortable one becomes, we must not let the lethargy set in, which is what I think is happening now in the black community. Because of the expansion of the black middle class, there seems to be a lethargy in the struggle for human rights. In fact, I think the human rights struggle has been eclipsed by the women's lib struggle. So I think, you know, this was the richest man in the world. He could have retired after his first championship, but he didn't. He kept fighting. He knew there was things to fight for. And I think that's what can be learned.
Yeah. Well, I hope this is going to travel. Are there any plans? I know it's really expensive, but it sounds like something that all Canadians should have a shot at seeing.
Well, in fact, there's been inquiries made from all over North America, so I'm sure it's going to be remounted in the very near future, without a doubt.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And if you're going to be in the Halifax area, this is, the play is there. There we go. Shine Boy. That's the outside of the Neptune Theatre. It'll be on until March 13th. We'll be right back.